I want everybody on this team to understand what it means to have humility, and you understand how to apply this to every decision and take action on what we talk about today. There's a story of this guy who basically, it was the Roman Empire back in whatever BC, who knows, long time ago, right? And there's a general who he won like the greatest battle that they had in all of the lands. And so this guy goes, he wins this battle, and everyone's praising him when he comes back. And they're all saying like, you're our savior, you saved us, you're our leader. While this is all happening, he like comes back into the village and everyone's like, oh my God, you're amazing. They're all like praising him. And as he's coming back through, he actually asks one of his men to get down and repeat something to him. The entire time while everyone's saying like, you're amazing, you saved us. He asked this guy to repeat this, which was, you're only a man, you're only a man, you're only a man. Why did he do that? Because he understood the danger of letting the attention go to his head, right? And so he knew that by remaining humble, he had a higher likelihood of winning the next battle. And so he sought to maintain his humility. I love this quote by John Wooden. Talent is God-given, be humble. Fame is man-given, be thankful. Conceit is self-given, be careful. And so humility is the antidote to pride that can come from recognition and fame. And by making an everyday choice to credit others and not just ourselves, we remain open to continue growing as leaders and make room to celebrate the success of not just ourselves, but all of everyone around us. So why is this so important? I love this quote as well. Power is dangerous unless you have humility. How many times have we seen this ruin businesses? I know that us on the portfolio side, we have seen this time and time again with multiple founders where it's like they start to get successful and they start to get more power, and then all of a sudden they think they're untouchable. They think they have no room to grow, and they start treating other people poorly. And so power is dangerous unless you have humility. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this with you guys today is because actually I experienced this 7 years ago in Gym Launch. I had a handful of young, I would say insecure leaders in Gym Launch who aspired to be big leaders one day. I love when people are aspiring leaders and they want to be poured into and they want to be helped. Like that's probably my favorite thing to help people do is like, I think most people on this team probably feel that way. It's like you like helping others, right? You like helping people achieve their goals. You like pouring into people. And so what did I do? And what did everybody else on the leadership do? Poured into them, mentored them, and praised them into their potential, right? And so we took these people who were very green and gave them a lot of praise, gave them all the credit, like constantly trying to do that. And that's something I focus on a lot is like, I always want to be giving people credit. What happened was that I didn't warn them of this old saying, which is that nothing fails like success. And so what happened was that those leaders that were the very young, insecure, humble leaders, they became what I would call is like drunk with power, like legitimately. They started suppressing other people around them. They started claiming all the success for themselves. And worst off, they started to put their personal success above the team's. And so there was this complete switch. And I think a lot of that happened, guys, because the company was very successful. It became very successful very fast. We became number one in the industry. And you know what? It got to people's heads. They started thinking, oh, my shit doesn't stink. Like I'm fucking the world's best at sales, marketing, CS, whatever it was, right? When in fact, even myself, I think that we just got lucky to a very large degree. But I started watching like people on the team, like letting all of this stuff get to their heads. And I was like, gosh, I don't think I've done a good job of making people aware of this. And so what happened was we had this tool called Office Vibe. And I remember two of the leaders, they had ratings where they were in the top 98th percentile of leaders. And that went to less than 50% within 8 months. What does that mean? That means their teams think that they became shitty. So their teams literally said they became worse leaders. And it really sucked for me to see it happen. I don't want that to happen here. And so a leader who lets success get to their head becomes a bully. Truly. It's like you look at the difference between a hero and a villain. It's like the story is the same. It's just like what they choose to do with the power. That's why I refuse to make the same mistake twice. Instead, I just want to educate everybody on what humility and true leadership actually looks like. How can we apply humility to how we show up as leaders? 3 things. 1, when making a decision, be concerned with what is right, not who is right. 2nd, hire and promote for humility, fire for ego and pride. That's how I look at it. And I want to share that with everybody here so you guys know. And 3rd is in order to admit that you have deficits, that's how you grow. When making a decision, we want to be concerned with what is right, not who is right. What does that look like? We need teammates who do not get offensive or emotional that if they're wrong, but instead insist on finding the best solution for the company and the team, right? So we need people who think, what is the best decision for the team rather than the best decision for me? This is how I make decisions. Constantly thinking, trying to put myself, honestly, just out of the equation, because oftentimes the best decision for this company is going to be the most uncomfortable for me. Because I'm like, gosh, I'm gonna have to retrain these people on this. I'm gonna have to get this many people hired. I'm gonna have to change this. I'm gonna reset these expectations, reset these roles. It's like you have to put that aside and put aside the short-term pain you're going to have to incur and rather just say like, what makes the most sense given the vision of where we're going and our values of how we want to get there. And so we need people who sacrifice their own status. If you look at people who are the best teammates, they will constantly do that. They don't care if they look stupid in front of the group. They want to do what's best for the group. And there's a difference between trying to look good in front of people and trying to do your best. And so it's people who are more concerned with making the right decisions than getting the credit for them. The second piece is hire and promote for humility, and we fire for ego and pride, right? And this is just how my brain works. Like, if somebody in this company is the Michael Jordan of their division, but they're a complete asshole, you will not be on this team. I don't give a fuck how good you are. And I would like everybody in this company to understand that, because that one person, they stand out because they step on others. And if you actually read the biography of like Michael Jordan or any of these great players, the reason they were able to be great is because they learned how to be a teammate. So if you read any of their biographies, that's a key piece in all of their learnings, is that they realized they could not be great on their own unless they understood how to interact with the entire team. And so high performance does not equal a promotion, right? Half the time what allows somebody to be a high-level individual contributor, right, stunts their growth in a leadership position, especially because a lot of the times when you are an individual contributor, right, you do things that you get credit for. And what happens that a lot of people in this team could tell you, when you move into a leadership position, you don't get the credit anymore. Ask people who get promoted. People are like, I'm so excited to be promoted. Okay, what happens is that you now get measured on your team's performance, and all the praise goes to your team, not necessarily you. And so that is part of stepping into a leadership position, and it's something to be expected. Question is, do you know how many star performers never make it to the championships? Over 80%. Do you guys know why this is? Because humility is a better indicator of potential than confidence is, much of the times. Because if you are incredibly confident in yourself, but you cannot be a teammate, you can't be humble, and you can't corral other people together and collaborate with other people, then nobody's going to want to talk to you. They're not going to be around you. And you ultimately, if you do that, make the average of the team lower. So a lot of times what it is that one person stands out. You know, they're a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. But the reality is it's because they're suppressing everybody else on the team, and it inflates the difference. And if you think about it, right, when someone is unskilled in their own area, they often don't also see their flaws and they're overconfident. Has anyone ever seen that? And then for a lot of people on the other side, it's the people that are second guessing themselves, they're feeling insecure, but it comes naturally to them, and therefore they don't recognize it as strength because it isn't hard. And so that's what a lot of people refer to as humble. And so pride looks like someone who refuses to be flexible, because in being flexible, they may in turn be wrong. Prideful people hate to be wrong, and they're going to argue their point of view every step of the way. So I just want you guys to understand what this looks like. It's getting defensive, it's arguing our point, it's not being open-minded to what other people have to say. Being very defensive, like, this is my area, this is my point, this is my thing, right? It's like, well, this is our team. We're all going towards the same goal. And we should absolutely share our perspectives and points of views, and we should be open to those things and be open to being wrong. You know, sometimes people will give me an idea, and sometimes they come from you guys in the surveys, and I'm like, oh shit, that's so good. Yeah, I should not be doing it the way I'm doing it. It's not like you have the experience being a CEO and you're telling me, it's like it's coming from somebody who has no experience, but they have a really valuable perspective. And so what I'd love is if everyone on this team can take that same perspective, which is like, the more perspectives you can gather and take into consideration on the things that you're doing, the way that you act, the way that you develop yourself, I think the better you'll be. And so example one would be, we have a prideful teammate, accepts no feedback or becomes defensive when it's given, right? And then they play victim and often blame others for having a poor perception of their behavior. Has anyone ever seen that on a team of somebody who's like, oh God, everyone thinks I'm this way, but I'm not? And you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just because you're like that. Example two would be that a primal teammate doesn't respect anybody else on the team. They talk down to others and use their power to suppress others and make themselves look better. Anyone ever seen that? Where it's like someone taking credit for something that you've done and you're like, what? Right? So ego looks like someone resistant to change because it goes against a belief they have or a way they want things to be. And if they accept that it needs to be changed, it is also mean that they're wrong, right? And so if you see someone being very defensive in the way of doing something and saying like, can't do that, won't do that, etc., even if it seems like it comes from a place of fear, it's also coming from ego. It also looks like someone taking all the credit for a team's work rather than giving it to others, right? So like leaders in this company, we want people who are constantly giving credit to teams, not people who are taking credit themselves. And if you aspire to be a leader, you will give credit to everybody around you rather than take it yourself. Another example of this, right, is sometimes what you see is people start overhiring for a department because they want to claim they have a big team. feels good to people's egos. The second example of this is a leader who refuses to give up tasks and projects. Now, they may not do this consciously, but subconsciously, because what does that also mean? It also means you give up credit when they're actually successfully completed. I think one of the reasons that it's hardest for somebody to move, for example, from like a salesperson to a sales manager role is because when you're a salesperson, you're constantly getting reinforcement from the sales and getting like, great job, thumbs up, like so good, close the sale. And then when you move up into managing a sales team, nobody says jack shit to you. It's like all you ever hear is probably when like, hey, why is the team low today? And then you're like, man, I kind of miss selling. Like I made money every time I like was on the phone and people told me I did a good job. And so it's funny because in our portfolio companies, I talk about this where it's like, I get why that's a hard transition. I myself did it where it's like, you're constantly getting praised and then you move into a position where like, you're not getting any of that. And you're not getting the I would say like high of even like closing a sale. So there's multiple things that you lose. And the last example of pride would be a manager who does not give his or her team time and training necessary to be successful. So you see some people that do this so they can exaggerate their own importance in the company, right? To look like they're needed. Again, I'm giving this to you guys, not saying that anyone here does this, but I'm trying to protect us so that if somebody makes their way in here who does this, you guys push them out. This is not acceptable. We don't want anybody who does this. And I think that the reason I want to convey this in these trainings is because I want you guys to do that for me. I don't see everything. People act way differently in front of me than all of you. I know that may be surprising, but everyone's always on their best behavior when they talk to me. And so most of the time I'm like, wow, everyone's amazing. I never see anything bad. And so it really is the job of this whole team to listen to what I'm saying and be able to spot it. We're going to add probably double the team this year. And so there's going to be a lot of people that come in. We're not going to hire every person as the right person. And so we need to know if these things are being seen because ultimately we are all stewards of the business. And if one person sees something, it's likely that somebody else has also experienced it. And lastly, micromanaging. People who micromanage because they don't have confidence in their team, often because they themselves are just insecure, right? Because if you lack belief in yourself, you probably lack belief in others, right? That's something we don't want to have here. We don't want people who are micromanaging, not delegating, not giving people the opportunity to fail. And I think that a lot of teams and a lot of people, there's a stigma around failure. That's not something we have here. It is totally fine to fail and fall on your ass. And I actually think the more that you fall on your ass and the more that you look stupid in front of other people on this team, the higher up you will be able to go. Because it shows that you're not fearful of making progress. And lastly, not letting an idea go because it was their idea or they're being above the work, right? And I think a lot of the times we do see this in team settings, which is like you want to do something because it's your idea, but then somebody gives you a different idea, and maybe because of who it came from or how they said it, you're not open to it. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, that's probably a better idea. And so I think that it takes an extra layer of muscle to say, even if I don't like who that came from or the way it was delivered, is it still a better idea than mine? And like, I can tell you that happens all the time with me and Alex and Dr. Kashi. Like they'll say stuff to me and they'll be like, oh, that thing you did, yeah, that's wrong. And like the way that they deliver it, it's not the way I sometimes want to hear it. And this is an open conversation, which is why I'm sharing it here. But then I'll sit back and think, and I'm like, you know what? But you're right. Like I could totally do it better if I did it this way. And it's not about who is right. It's about what is right and what's going to get us towards our goal. And lastly, the third thing is that in order to grow, we have to admit that we have deficits, right? Because you can't receive feedback if you don't believe that you have room to improve. You will also not be open to feedback if you use excuses that are tied to character traits. I've always been this way. This is just who I am. I have heard that in people in this team. I've always been this way. I've never been able to do that. This is always who I am. So you have been repeating the same behaviors for many years. You have a lot of past experience to indicate that you have a lot of practice acting this way. I'll give you common examples. Like learning to be organized, that's not a personality trait. That's a skill. You know, learning to regulate your emotions, not a personality trait. It's a skill. You know, learning to be attentive and focused, that's a skill. And so I think a lot of the times, if we want to be open to growing as a teammate on this team, we have to realize that any excuse we hide behind, it's just making it easy for us to continue doing that behavior. And oftentimes it just means that we have a lack of a skill. And I think that luckily there's a lot of people on this team that do have skills that other people don't. And so if, for example, you're listening to this, you're like, yeah, you know, I have been saying that I'm just not X, I'm just not Y. It's like, well, there's someone on this team that has that. Maybe I can ask them for help. So those who grow the most, I would say, are the most fluid in their identities with this. You stand up for your values, you stand up for your beliefs, but you remain flexible in how you act. This is one of my favorite sayings. It's not a do, right? It's a do, not a who, right? It's what you do, it's not who you are. So like being organized, acting focused, being flexible. Those are all skills. They're not part of who you are. And so, in order to move up into a leadership position, for example, those are skills that people have to acquire. And I think something really cool that Neil's been working on is kind of like we're putting together like a little rubric of what those skills are to be clear for everybody of like what that looks like in the company. But just to be clear, I think that this is probably one of the biggest things that blocks people is they say like, that's just not who I am. I've just never done things that way. Well, why could you not learn? You know what I mean? And so I think defending your deficits is the surest way that you're going to stunt your growth and the team that surrounds you. So anytime you catch yourself, it's like, watch yourself. Are you defending the deficits that you have? And I think that every time for me, like I've personally grown a lot, it's been when I finally said to myself, like, this is bullshit and you need to stop defending this because it's stopping me from growing, right? And the funny thing is that how does a company grow? A company grows when the people in it grow. And so in my opinion, if you look at a company, what's the only appreciating asset in it? People are the only asset that we can continue to compound on our skills time and time again. Pretty much everything else in a company, if not taken care of, gets worse over time. But people are the one thing that can continue to get better. Now that we've established what humility is, right, and what it means, I want to clarify for a larger segment of the population, what it is also not. Being insecure and uncertain of oneself, that is not humility. Okay, only letting others speak and never voicing your actual opinion, that is not humility. Constantly people-pleasing, that is not humility. Beating yourself up for your deficits and only focusing on the negative. Think about this too. If you beat yourself up, you are literally becoming a victim of yourself. This is not humility either. Humility exists on a spectrum. So on one side, what I just referred to, servility, which is overly attentive to one's weaknesses and oblivious to their strengths. Now, I would say that a lot of really great leaders start here. And because they are so oblivious, they try very fucking hard. So I would actually always rather over-index on that side of the spectrum than the opposite. So I'll just say, if you relate, then I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. Now, on the other side, you have people who are overly attentive to their strengths and oblivious to their weaknesses. In my opinion, this one is harder because you have to get someone to see where their deficits are, which is like an extra step in the process. But in the middle, we have where we'd like to get to, right? Which is an accurate assessment of one's strengths and weaknesses. So that is where humility sits. It is just an accurate assessment of what your deficits are and what you're good at. So I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our CEOs, and he was saying, he's like, I'm really struggling with the fact that I think that I know what we need to do in this situation, but I've got these two other stakeholders that I have to loop in. And I was like, you're very good at making decisions. You should make the decisions. He was like, I don't want to sound arrogant. He literally said that. And I was like, having an accurate assessment of what you're good at is humility. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. It means that you're using your resource, like yourself as a resource to the company, in the best way possible because you recognize what you're good at. And when you recognize what you're good at, you can apply that strength to areas that's needed in the company. This case, it was decision making. And he's like, you're right, I should probably do that. And so this is also permission to all of you of like, if you have something you're really good at, you should be vocal about it and also try and apply it. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that there's like, you're arrogant to any degree. It's like, thank you for taking your strengths and applying them in the company. Like we would like to utilize everybody's skill set. And so I really like this quote by Clayton Christensen. We decided that humility was defined not by self-deprecating behaviors or attitudes, but by the esteem with which you regard others. Generally, you can be humble only if you feel really good about yourself, and if you want to help those around you feel really good about themselves too. I love that quote because I think it nicely ties the two sides together. And so here's what I want to do next. I want you guys to grab something to write with or pull up like a pad on your phone or your laptop, whatever you're on right now. Because what I want to do is that spectrum that I just referenced, I want us to figure out where you sit on that. So we're going to assess ourselves. We've got what we call the 4 A's of humility. Here's the 4 A's. We've got ask for feedback, acknowledge mistakes, ask for help, and actively listen. If you look at all across like all the different things that go into humility, I would say these are the top 4 skills. Are there other skills surrounding it? Sure. But like, if we break it down into what I think is most applicable for everybody here, I would say it's these 4. So the first one is ask for feedback. I want to make this really tactical for you guys. There are 2 rules in asking for feedback. These are really, really important. 1, ask specific questions. General questions lead to general answers. Vague questions lead to vague answers. So if you're like, how do you think I did? Like, I hate when people ask me that question. I really do. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm just like, good. You know, because if they didn't do amazing, you're like, bad? Like, what do you want me to say? It's just like you're gonna get, it's not gonna be the best answer from the person. Now, the second rule, and this is following what we talk about with praise versus punishment, ask what you can do better in the future rather than what you did wrong in the past. We don't wanna say like, how do you think I did? A great alternative would be something like, what's one thing I could do next time to make that a 10 out of 10? So like for me, if I was like, I'm gonna ask the team for feedback after I do this. If I was just like, how do you guys think I did? Like, does it prompt a very specific answer? Probably not. But if I were to say, what's one thing I could do to make it a 10 out of 10 next time? It's like, okay, I just need one thing that would make it a 10 out of 10. Paints it in a positive light as well. If we look at questions to ask, for those of you who want to ask for feedback, I've put what I think are like the top 5. What could I do to make that a 10 out of 10? What one thing, if I did differently, would improve this the most? On a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do? What would raise it to a 3? What would raise it to a 4? What would raise it to a 5? What is one thing I could do more of to make this better? What is one thing I could do less of to make this better? These are fantastic questions to ask people, because if you ask specific questions, you get specific directives, and directives move you forward towards where you want to go, rather than asking for vague feedback about how you did, which just makes you feel shitty. And so again, if we're like taking the frame of praise versus punishment, we don't want to ask for punishment. Like half the time when someone's like, how do you think I did? They get insulted. People are like, you know. I actually not that long ago asked somebody when I did a speech, I was like, how do you think that was? They're like, could have been better. And I was like, Jesus, okay. That was a terrible question to ask, and now I feel shitty about myself. Wish I never asked it. But I didn't do a great job asking for feedback in the way that I was going to get the best answers, right? I probably could have said something like, hey, what's one thing I could do more of to make this better? That would have probably gotten me a better answer. So here's what I want you guys to do. We're gonna rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 5 on asking for feedback. So 1 is you're very bad at this. You ask general questions and you ask about how you did in the past. 5 is you ask specific questions and you ask future pacing questions. What can I do better next time? What would make this a 10 out of 10? So I'd like you guys to just take 15 seconds to write down where you fall on that scale. Let's move on to the second one. We're gonna do something and share at the end. Acknowledge mistakes. Acknowledging mistakes has really 3 parts. The first part is just admitting that you made a mistake. So I think in a lot of companies, you guys have probably been at places where they want you to hide mistakes. If there's one thing I want from you, it's that you're honest. And what does honesty mean to me? It means that you admit that you made a mistake. I will take somebody who admits they make mistakes over somebody who doesn't make mistakes all day, right? Because everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I'm sure you guys see half of them. And so I want people to know that's okay. But if you perpetuate a culture of hiding mistakes, you perpetuate the problem that might have existed in a past company you've been at, right? Where everyone doesn't talk about where they fuck up, or where they make a mistake, or when they're not feeling great. And so the first piece is just admit it and exclaim it. Hey team, I just wanted to let you know that that miss on Thursday, it was actually my mistake. I mixed up blah, 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 which resulted in the error. Just own it. Be honest about it. And then the second piece is act on it and again, exclaim it. I have already put up into place a process in Asana so this doesn't happen again. Moving forward, this is to prevent any errors from occurring or missteps. Here's a link to that. Thank you all for understanding. You don't need to dwell on it. You don't need to excuse it. You don't need to even say why it happened. You just need to say what you're gonna do better next time. I don't care what happened. I just care that you took precaution so that next time it doesn't happen. Because what is learning? Same condition, new behavior. So if we make a mistake and then we have no new behavior that occurs, then that means we didn't learn. If you make a mistake and you take action on it, it means that you learned. And that is what's most important. And then the last piece is move on. Once the mistake has occurred, there's so much time, especially people on this team that are hard on themselves and try very hard to be a 10 out of 10 all the time. You rob yourself of the time you could have spent focusing on the solution by dwelling on the mistake. This is something I did for years, and I think it was about 3 years ago that I realized I was just done with it. Because it literally makes you worse. You beating yourself up, you dwelling on a mistake, taking any time, you're just robbing yourself of future potential to actually do better next time. And so there's a lot of studies on this. It doesn't help you, doesn't help anybody around you. No point in doing it. So again, we make a mistake, we want to own it, and we want to say what we're going to do better next time, and then fucking move on. That's it. So let's rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being, I don't admit that I make mistakes, and if I do, I don't always change my behavior. 5 being, I always own my mistakes, and I make sure that I put something into place so it doesn't happen again. Third piece is ask for help. Asking for help is a skill. When someone tells me that they don't ask for help, I'm not impressed. The best teammates ask for help in the areas they're deficient, they're learning, or they realize it creates an opportunity for another teammate in terms of growth, recognition, team bonding. The best people I know that are the most successful are really good at asking for help. Now, do they ask for help all the time? No, but when they need it, they have an accurate ability to assess their own deficits, right? And so then when they have an area of deficit, they're able to say like, hey, there would be a better outcome if I asked this person for help who's good at this. So for me, I have plenty of areas of deficits, which is why we have an entire team, right? If I didn't, it was like, that wouldn't make sense. So a lot of the times I'm constantly bringing people in because I'm not the best person for something, especially the fact that I'm not doing your jobs for you. Half the time people come to me like, what do you think of this? I'm like, I don't know. You're the one doing it every day. How the fuck do I know? Like I have no more information than you. But I'd say that that is something that I've worked on a lot over time, which is like, when do you ask for help? And so these are 3 things that really helped me when I understood why asking for help is such a positive, not just for you asking, but for the person who's asked. The first one was relationship building. If we didn't ask each other for help, we wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to bond with each other. And so every time you ask somebody for help, you have the opportunity to form a deeper relationship with that person. My favorite thing to do with people that you're trying to form a relationship is put them on a project together, because then they have to help each other to get to the end goal. The second is usefulness. People like to see the result of their help. Does anybody here like when someone asks them for help and then you like crush it and it really works? Yes, so people like feeling useful. And most often it's like they like seeing the impact that their help has. So if you ask somebody for help and then you take the credit for the thing at the end and give them no credit and don't show them what happens at the very end, they're probably not going to help you again. But if you show them the impact of what their help did, they're likely going to want to do it again and help more people on the team. And lastly is recognition. People do more of what they're praised to do. And so if you praise somebody in public for helping you with something, they also will want to do it again because they like getting praised in public, and there's benefits for both of you. What does asking for help look like? I would say this is like the perfect way to frame it. Hey, name, I'm really struggling with producing enough calls for the sales team. I know you have some really great ideas about how to do that. I was wondering if you had some time where we could work together towards a solution to book more calls. And I think it would have a huge impact on the team. It's like, who's going to say no to that? But I think that a lot of the times, rather than asking for help, we just remain quiet. We say, oh, I don't want to bug that person. I don't want to nag that person. They've got too much work. People love getting asked to help with stuff. People love feeling useful and like other people need their help. And so you actually do them a favor by asking. If you've ever been the type of person that's like, I don't like to ask for help, I don't need to ask for help, I just want you to know that doesn't help the team. So here's what we're going to do. Rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is I never ask for help, and when I do, I probably don't praise that person or recognize them enough for it. And a 5 is I'm great at asking for help, and I always give recognition to the people that help me. Last one, we've got actively listen. People who are on the side of arrogance when it comes to humility, right, and they start off over there, oftentimes you talk to them, you don't really feel heard. And so active listening, I think, would be more for that end of the spectrum. And the reason that it's a skill when it comes to humility is because of these things. People are going to talk more to people who they know listen to them. If you want more people to talk to you, you show them that you listen. If people don't talk to you, you might not be a good listener. That's just it. If you're like, not a lot of people talk to me, not a lot of people come to me, maybe you're a bad listener. That's also okay. That is a skill. It's not like you were born with a listening skill. This is something that we can work on. I just want you guys to understand the reason this is an important skill is because in a team, you want engagement and activity when it comes to communication. You want more people talking at more points in time. And so to do that, if you want more people to talk to you, you show them that you listen. That's it. It's honestly that simple. Like it's like, why is active listening important? Because people won't talk to you if you don't listen. That's literally it. They'll avoid you and they would rather talk to somebody else. It might not be the right person to solve the problem or to talk to, but they're going to talk to that person. So what does that look like? An active listening skill. There's really 3 pieces to it. The first is explore. So it's literally just asking open-ended questions followed by probing. Oh, interesting. Okay. Is there anything else that you would add there? Can you help me understand that piece that you just said about this? Is there anything else that you would put at this part? So you're basically exploring the questions that they're asking. I would say someone on our team that does this really well is Neil. He's fantastic at active listening. I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but like he's nodding his head And then he's asking for more. He's like, oh, interesting. Okay, what about this? What about that? What about this? Very good at doing that. So that's the first piece. We explore. If you're actually interested in what someone's saying, you do this naturally. But if you're not interested and you're more distracted with something else you're doing, then this is something you're going to have to work on. Because normally it's just curiosity-based questions. And so if you're not curious, you kind of have to manufacture it. The second piece is acknowledging. And this is literally just getting the person to acknowledge that you understand him or her, not the other way around. So it's literally, if I understand you correctly, this is what you meant, right? And so a lot of the times when me and Alex are talking, because we communicate differently, he's going to say a bunch of stuff to me, and then I'm going to be like, what did that mean? Like, what about this? What about that? What about? And so then I have to say, okay, first I ask probably 27 questions. I'm like, what about this? What about that? What about? Like, he's telling me the book launch plan, right? So I ask 17,000 questions. And then I repeat back to him what I think he meant and what it means. Okay, so this means this is the plan to launch the book, right? Is that accurate? And he's like, yes. I'm like, got it. And the last piece, after you've done that, is just respond. And again, this part is up to you. There's no right way to respond to somebody. But once you actually understand what the person has said, your response is probably going to be more thoughtful and targeted. So again, explore, acknowledge, and respond. That's how we actively listen to someone. What we're going to do is just rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1, I do not show that I'm listening. I just sit there as the recipient of their words, like a brick fucking wall, which is also okay. We can work on that. Or 5 is like, you're very actively engaged when someone is giving you information, and you will ask questions until you comprehend what they say. And people want to talk to you. I'm telling you, if you look at people in the company who most people like talking to, it's because they're good listeners. What was your lowest score? I want you to circle it right now. And then where can you improve to actually operationalize this humility? Take what you got from this presentation, but I would make a very small one goal over the next 2 weeks, just like a sprint, in terms of where your lowest score is, and then commit to it and just let everybody know, because you are more likely to achieve goals that you share with other people.